The Zorathians, a highly advanced alien species, had lived on the edge of the galaxy for millennia, weaving their dominance throughout the stars. They prided themselves on their scientific achievements, their technological marvels, and their unyielding code of logic and precision. At the very core of their civilization stood their royal family, the Zorathian monarchy, who were as cold as the stars they ruled. Their hearts, it was said, had been replaced by circuits, their emotions depressed by genetic engineering. Princess Lyra, heir to the Zorathian throne, was no exception. Brilliant, calculated, and meticulous in every movement, she embodied the ideals of her people. To her, emotion was a weakness, something that clouded judgment, held back progress, and caused destruction. She often looked down upon other species, especially humans, whose emotions seemed to dominate their every action. The idea of humanity being any more than a primitive, unrefined species had always been laughable to her, but her perception of humans was about to be shattered. The Zorathians had long believed that the galaxy was theirs for the taking, and for that, they had established colonies and outposts across countless systems. One such outpost, however, had encountered a sudden and unexplained rebellion from its inhabitants. Desperate, the Zorathian Empire dispatched Lyra to the remote planet of Typhon 9 to restore order. Little did she know, this mission would be the beginning of an unforgettable journey that would change her view of humanity forever. The planet was a desolate world, a craggy wasteland with ruined structures scattered across the barren surface. The rebellion had been swift and vicious, and it was clear that the colonists had no intention of surrendering. As Lyra surveyed the devastation from her ship's cockpit, she felt nothing but a cold indifference, her eyes narrowing in professional evaluation. "Deploy the troops," she ordered, her voice calm and unwavering. As the Zorathian ground forces stormed the planet's surface, Lyra remained in the air, overseeing the operation with an unshakable poise. The rebellion was met with swift and brutal suppression, but as Lyra watched from above, something unusual caught her attention: a lone human soldier in the midst of the chaos. He was outnumbered, surrounded by rebels. Yet there was a strange ferocity in his eyes, an intensity that seemed so human. The human soldier fought with a desperation that piqued Lyra's interest. His movements were erratic, driven by instinct rather than logic, but he seemed unyielding in his determination. His name was Captain Ethan Hunter, and he had been assigned to lead the Zorathian forces after the colony had fallen. Yet for reasons unknown, his loyalty had shifted, and he had chosen to stay behind to protect the last remnants of the settlers. Lyra watched as Ethan fought valiantly, saving civilian after civilian, and despite the overwhelming odds, he kept pushing forward. His heart was in every punch, every shot fired. It was a stark contrast to the cold, calculated nature of her people, and Lyra couldn't help but be intrigued. As the battle raged on, disaster struck. A rogue explosion from a nearby rebel attack hit Lyra's ship. The force of the blast sent her spiraling toward the surface. Her ship crashed violently into the ground, and her systems began to fail. Lyra was thrown from her seat, and her vision blurred as pain seared through her body. The Zorathian princess was stranded, injured, and vulnerable on a planet she had once thought she could conquer without effort. Ethan had seen it all from the battlefield. The Zorathian princess's ship plummeting to the surface was no small event. He knew the princess's identity instantly. There was no mistaking her regal ship, the emblem of the Zorathian Empire. The battle, for a brief moment, seemed irrelevant as his instincts took over. He dashed toward the crash site, his combat gear offering little protection against the harsh environment of Typhon 9. When Ethan reached the wreckage, he found Lyra unconscious and critically injured. Her once pristine armor was now charred, and blood stained the edges of her uniform. Without a second thought, Ethan moved to her side, his hands working quickly to assess her injuries. For all his years of training and combat experience, this was not something he had ever anticipated. He had no reason to care for the princess of the Zorathian Empire. She was the very symbol of the empire that had subjugated countless worlds, and the one responsible for the death and destruction that had come to Typhon 9. But when he looked into her face, pale and bruised, with no hint of the regal, emotionless ruler she was supposed to be. Something shifted inside him. The human didn't hesitate. He lifted the alien princess into his arms, carrying her away from the wreckage. She was a symbol of everything he despised, yet he couldn't ignore the simple, undeniable truth. She was a life worth saving. Ethan moved quickly through the devastated terrain, finding shelter in an abandoned structure not far from the crash site. He patched up her injuries as best as he could, despite his limited medical supplies. As she slowly regained consciousness, her eyes fluttered open, and the first thing she saw was the human soldier's face, his expression one of resolve and determination. "Why?" Lyra whispered, her voice hoarse, barely able to understand the situation. "Why?" Ethan repeated, a bitter smile curling on his lips. "Because despite what you think, not every human is heartless." Lyra stared at him, the words striking her like a hammer. Heartless. She had always believed that the humans were driven by emotion, by passion, by weakness. She had been taught to view them as inferior, to believe that their hearts were their greatest flaw. But this human, this soldier, had just saved her life, putting aside every reason not to. Ethan's eyes softened for a brief moment, almost as if he could read her mind. "Maybe you don't understand it yet, princess, but we fight for the things that matter. We fight for life, even when it seems lost. That's what makes us human." For the first time, Lyra felt something stir within her. It wasn't logic. It wasn't reason. It was emotion, raw, unfiltered, and powerful. It was a feeling she had been taught to suppress, but now it surged within her chest, and she could no longer ignore it. The human, with all his imperfections, had saved her. And in doing so, he had shown her the one thing that the Zorathians had long since forgotten: compassion, courage, love. Emotions, yes, but perhaps in the end, they were what made humanity stronger than the cold logic of her people. As Ethan watched her, he knew the battle was far from over. The rebellion on Typhon 9 still raged, and the Zorathian Empire would soon return to finish what they had started. But for now, there was something greater at stake. Lyra, the princess, had been given a glimpse of what humanity truly was, and as they stared into each other's eyes, both of them knew that this moment would be the spark of something far bigger than either could imagine. A new world was about to be born, one where the heart, not the mind, would reign supreme.